Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of CashFlo Unscripted with new insights from the Indian business and finance. We're a podcast coming to you from India with topical insights from leaders of the Indian business and finance community. My name is Ankur Bhageria. I'm the founder of CashFlow. And I have with me today Mr. Manas Datta, Group CFO of Wockhardt Limited, one of India's truly global pharmaceutical companies with operations across the globe in the US, in Europe, and in India. Manas is an experienced finance leader with more than 30 years of rich experience in corporate finance, treasury, M&A, taxation, and in diversified businesses such as pharma, chemicals, fertilizer, power, and even hospitality businesses. He's a cost accountant by training and an alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad. Mr. Datta is also an avid reader and loves to watch soccer. He's also an ardent fan of Kishore Kumar. Mr. Datta has been featured in Forbes India in the September 2019 issue. Manas has also been a recipient of many awards and accolades over the years, including CFO 100 for 3 years in a row, and named among the most influential CFOs by the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, and many more. Mr. Datta, it's a pleasure to have you on Cashflow. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. With your introduction, it looked to me that something very alien to me. I didn't understand that somebody can talk so many words for me. Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure. It's a pleasure having you over. And Manas, just diving right into it, right? Wockhardt, of course, has had a tumultuous journey over the last decade, and it's no secret, from being the sixth largest pharma company in India, of revenues almost touching 6,000 crores, and then shrinking by 50% to almost 3,000 crores in 2020 over the 7 years. When you took over as Wockhardt CFO, can you paint a picture of the business at the time and what was the key mandate that you had starting in?
Well, of course, your facts are absolutely right, Ankur, that from almost $1 billion, we have come to a little close to $500 million over the period. But there are different fundamental outlook to that, right? The perspective should be a little different. One is that during this last almost 4 or 5 years or 6, 7 years, the Wockhardt had 3 different buckets of strategy and one trouble. So I will talk about the trouble first so that we understand the trouble, and then we will talk about the 3 buckets. The trouble was of the US FDA. Pharma happened to be one of the most, I think, conveniently placed, controlled industry. I will not say a regulated industry. It is highly controlled industry. So US FDA related matters in 3 of our plants globally, including India, actually created a havoc for the Wockhardt in terms of its, the molecules that we were selling across the various geographies, and particularly in US. When I started, the US was approximately $500+ million itself, our US business, right? And today it is about $125 million. So we lost more than $400 million only for the US business. So that is only because of a very limited action that we could enforce is on our quality management in India. That's a factually right fact. On the other side, that's the degrowth side. On the other side, I'll be very happy to share with you that the 3 verticals I'm talking about, that during this last 6 years, Wockhardt became the only company in the universe, I repeat, the only company in the universe to have 6 new molecules in the anti-infective space, right? Which colloquially we call it as antibiotics at home. And you may or may not be aware that today we have one of the largest and most end-to-end antibiotic research program in the globe, right? Even probably larger than some of the best known multinationals on the field. And these 6 molecules, these are the new molecules. Let us not forget that all Indian pharmaceutical players are a generic player. We have a patented drugs. Now that's the difference. Now, it is not only as an Wockhardian I become very proud, but also as an Indian I become very proud that without much infrastructure of R&D, that is the government, the economy, the paraphernalia of the public and private sector play, right? And the money not being allowed to be pumped into the R&D. A small company like us, which is about 6,000 crores, could play in the world and became only company to have 6 new molecules which are in phase 3 clinical trial. And in last 2 decades, the only company in India to launch 2 new antibiotics in this country, patented drugs, no more generic. So when I say Mroc or Mroc O in India, it's patented drugs. It's not like paracetamol,
Yeah.
right? Or it's not like ibuprofen, which can be given to anybody. So that is the one side which probably, I know people who follow the pharma well globally, they know about it. On the other side, we also had looked into a possible moving out of a very, very generic branded business in India, right? Which were not growing. So one side is a very highly research driven. On the other side, there is a degrowing generic branded business in India, which we thought that we will move out gradually, get the money from the divestment and put it into R&D. And the third bucket is during this period, we actually entered almost every nooks and corners of the world. So whether it is from Australia to US or from Latin to Bangladesh, we were present in every place. So that is what was very, very important during this period. So when you look at, yes, I do agree that there were troubles, but on the other side, some of the actions that we have taken during this last couple of years probably will take us to a different league, hopefully, in the next couple of quarters or maybe years. I will not talk about vaccine because this is very, very recent. And you asked me a question that what was my mandate? My mandate was very simple. Take Wockhardt out of the comfort zone to a value territory. So I can give you an anecdote. When I joined, I asked my chairman that, look, during my interview time, I asked him that, look, I don't have any pharma background as a CFO. That why me? I don't have it. He said, I want somebody to look at de novo. So from a very, very comfort zone of doing certain things in a manner which we were habitual, move into a very, very value-driven, a different kind of a territories. That was the mandate as a CFO in terms of my initial journey in Wockhardt. If you have any follow-on question, we can do that. I will come back to this as and when.
Sure. And that's fascinating, Manas. And I'm just curious. So when you took over, the business was just, beginning to sort of turn around, right? There were some of these newer initiatives that were being planned at the time. What was the financial, situation for Wockhardt at the time? And I'm sure there would have been some immediate challenges that you would have had to grapple with on that front. Could you shed some light on, what were some of the challenges from a finance perspective?
Yes. The challenge for an Indian multinational like us and spending 14% of the top line in the R&D will be always the biggest challenge, right? And you know that probably other than certain benefits of taxation, so-called, no Indian bank or even the multinational banks actually try to understand and get into a funding for an R&D project. And R&D is very binary, either 0 or 1. It's not like your plant which can capacity of 100% can be operated at 50%. It does not work that way. So the challenge was twofold, Ankur. One is that making sure that the company is liquid enough, right, to get into spending more than $300 million over a period of time, right, on the R&D. And we spent actually more than almost $400 million we spent in the last couple of years, right? So including some of the capex for the plants that we have done for these patented drugs, like in Dubai and so on and so forth, in Shendra in India. So, and unfortunately, Wockhardt came out of the CDR just before my joining, and probably one of the most successful CDR in this country, right? 5 years ahead of its original term. We were supposed to come out of in 2020. 2018, and we came out in 2013. So, so the challenge is that when you have a stigma of CDR, hardly any bank touches you. But raising a $300 million at that particular point of time only for R&D, right? I'm very happy to share with you. You asked me a question that what are the challenges, right? To me, there are nothing called challenge. A provocation inside that everything that you face is a new opportunity. So in the last 7 years or 6 years I have been working here, we raised more than $700 million, right, in the various forms and manners. And right now, maybe the outstanding is about $300 million right now. But we did that in spite of the fact that we had a little bit of trouble or a little name issue for the CDA related matters. But we did that. So raising money, making sure that the organization structured globally in an evolving scenario of our business and evolving complexity of the taxation, particularly on the BEPS side, particularly on the transfer pricing side, particularly on the various OECD guidelines side, making the company in a manner which complies to and addresses to these issues were the second challenge, which we did. And the third challenge was making a very agile finance, right? From a reporting that was driven by a human being to a more reporting and a structure of cluster rather than a cluster, a single source reporting, making that we call it as day two reporting. I can actually publish my accounts on the day two of every month. So globally. So that was the third challenge, making sure that the technology plays a havoc role in terms of giving the management a right kind of, not the plethora of information, right kind of information to take a call. So we became not the critic of choices, we became the choices. Generally the CFOs are critic of choices.
Yeah, and that's very interesting. In fact, on this, the last point you mentioned, Manas, sort of this day two, publishing of accounts. Could you walk us through, that in a little more detail? What was it that you implemented there? How did you sort of go about it?
Well, I have to give you an anecdote to it, right? The anecdote is that when I joined on my first day of my joining in Wockhardt, my chairman called me on a lunch. And on the lunch table, he was saying that, look, Maharaj, I need these 14 things to be done on priority. So, okay, I'm not getting into all those 14 things. Only one thing I pick it up. He said, I get my MIS. He used the word MIS, the Management Information System, right? I hate that word, actually. Do you get your MIS every day in your body? You don't, right? But still your body works and fabulously works. So, but he said that the MIS, I get by about 14th and 15th of the month. Can you do one thing? That you take 6 months, reduce one day every month. So in 6 months down the line, I get it in the first week. Believe me, I told him, sir, you are very benevolent to me. All my previous chairman would have said, I need it tomorrow, right? You have given me 6 months to reduce that by 6 days or 7 days, right? We took actually 6 months. And that was, he spoke in September 2014 when I joined. And 2nd February 2015, right? We were up and running with our day two reporting. So what does it really mean? That means that by end of the month, without changing your revenue capturing, without changing your cutoff date, without changing anything on your accrual processes, without changing anything that normally an accountant will do to manage its reporting structure, you go live in reporting, capturing everything on the 31st of the month, right? Where this is US is 12 hours behind me, UK is 5 hours behind me, and Australia is 6 hours ahead of me. Whatever we do in the world, we cut off on the respective 31st, 12 midnight. So that means for India, it is day one. And the day two, which is the day two, right? For somebody, it will be day one. We complete our financials. So be it a profit and loss account, a balance sheet, a cash flow, the business-wise analysis, the product-wise analysis, distribution parameters analysis, supply chain analysis, working capital analysis, and R&D analysis. We started with about 30-page report. Now it is about 72-page report. Hopefully it is going to come down now, because we are cutting down onto number of slides that we present. So what we did is that, Ankur, is we coincidentally we were having a single platform, single source of SAP and ERP platform for quite some time in the organization. We also had a BPC, BCS running at the back end, right? We had our BI, BWs running on the back end, right? So we took that opportunity and made sure that every information is captured in the BPC, and we put it into and format which is required for making this. Of course, the beautification and classification happens, of course, in a little different manner. Later on, we try to do it in some different platforms, but nonetheless, this is what we call it. So technically speaking, on day two, I can give you my audited accounts to you.
And how, and just for the larger audience, how is this process different from what most organizations tend to follow, and where were the biggest interventions needed to get to this point?
Well, I will not be able to say in the company where different clusters or platforms are used, right? So I will not be a right person to comment on that. My feel is, like a human being, your nervous system is single source. Your database into the system must be also on the single source, right? Whatever ERP platform you use, right? And so this is the requirement number one. Coincidentally, we had it at that particular point in time. So it was easier for me to handle. But for a larger audience, is that single source data is important. Number two is that making sure all the SOPs that one follow, from the revenue recognition to every transaction and the possibility of doing every accruals, is same across the place. Your accounting and the costing, accounting, S&D, masters are all same, right? So that when I source, right? So once you do that, probably at the end of the month, what you do is a consolidation process, right? Making sure your related party or contra parties are eliminated, making sure your stock reserves are taken care, right? And making sure that you get the information from your FICO, from your S&D, and also all the other models, BPC I'm talking, or any kind of a budgetary models working together, so that your product-wise profitability you get, right? Yeah. Geography-wise, profit center-wise, cost center-wise, data you get. How to represent that will be, of course, a demand of an organization and an evolution of an organization. So my understanding, some of my friends who actually, we were very famous during in 2015 and 16, in every forums I used to go and talk about data reporting. One of my friends has moved beyond that, but he's an Indian company. I don't want to name that, but he made it day zero reporting. That means day one reporting. But that is only India, so it's much more easier to handle there.
Interesting, very interesting. And did you have to introduce new technologies to achieve this, or existing technologies sufficed?
Well, today we are trying to introduce a different technology, because in the last 5 years, Ankur, if you know, that probably the world has moved from a database ERP, right? ERP data driven reporting to a digital reporting. Now, that is a transformational process, right? So I think that migration and transformation is happening right now. I'm not talking about the visualization of reporting. People generally make a very big mistake that, getting a visualization of reporting and dashboarding is digitalization. But I think digitalization is a complete organizational transformation. It's not just a digital mode, right? So we are moving to those kind of things, and probably the ERP platforms that are throwing up the transactional data will now be getting into a data lake for more analytics that is happening. It can be merged with the right and have a much more benchmarking that we are moving. But that has happened of late because those kind of activities.
Interesting. And Manas, going to the other point that you talked about earlier, which was raising capital for a company which invests so heavily in R&D, especially given the Indian context. Could you walk us through the challenges there, and what were some of the things that you had to do to actually enable financing and availability of capital in a scenario of that nature?
Well, very interesting, and it may not, my words or my few sentences thereafter may not look very positive to majority of the listeners, right? Because why I'm saying that it may not be looking very positive to listeners in the sense is that when you take up a challenge, the challenge means which is not in accordance with what you expect. That's the technical and dictionary form of meaning of a challenge, right? So if you look at the R&D, particularly in pharma, right, and capacity addition in pharma or in hospitals, healthcare, in India, there are hardly any structured financial models. Unfortunately for R&D in pharma, globally, the debt-oriented funds are also not available. It is the venture capitalist or maybe a private equity players, they come into the play, right? Because who understand it, but those are highly costly actions. So what we decided is for sure is that while we will be funding our R&D, which was in the tune of, to some extent, sometime in a year, $100 billion, right? 70 to 80 million dollars. Right now it is 40 to 50 million dollars, right? So funding a 80, 90 million dollars year on year, if I have to get into, and that too for an area which may not be that well, nourished and well traveled, if I go to a private equity or venture capital, I will be losing heavily on my equity participation because there will be no valuation that I provide for. So probably a blue chip product or a really, really transformative product like which we did it over a period of time, which is a destination drugs we discovered, probably we would have sold at a much cheaper, right, in terms of its intended commercialization value, right? But at that particular point of time, had I gone it would have been few $100 million. So we would have lost probably huge in terms of the equity participation, right? So naturally, it was a trade-off between risk that company has to take, that fund an R&D by a debt rather than into by an equity, right? Which is a risky proposition. I do agree, but you have to balance and you have to know that are you really seriously believe in the research portfolio that you are handling? I think probably that call is not a forum to discuss here. We believed in that. And today, 5 years down the line, people believe in it. At that time, nobody was believing. So the biggest challenge here was that the Indian banks, they do not fund R&D, most of them. That's because it is binary. They don't understand, neither they want to understand, right? So what to do? So we did a different kinds of raising money with some with the Indian lenders, some with the global lenders, and so on and so forth. But uh, we had to make sure that while we are raising money for R&D, we have an adequate FACR being offered to the people on a traditional asset-based and a model of funding, right? Because the debt to EBITDA will not match in this particular case. And let us not forget that my R&D spent is actually charged up to the profit and loss account, right? So, which is intended for the future benefit, you are charging off majorly into the profit and loss account. So your EBITDA will be always under pressure. Like today, if I have my EBITDA is about $40 million, I'm charging $40 million of expenses there. So actually I'm up $80 to $100 million of EBITDA, right? But nobody will be bothered to do that. right? So rather than looking into a possibly and equity funding, we went into debt backed funding, and we did it. I'm very happy to share with you, Ankur, during those days when we were raising money in 2015 and 16, some of our rates on which is there in our public domain. I don't want to quote. Anybody who is interested can go and check our balance sheets, which are publicly available. And the cost of funding is also disclosed over there. Those will be matched to the best of the corporates globally and best of the corporates in this country, whereas we are not internationally rated, right? Neither our rating those days and neither today is very, very encouraging because we are leveraged.
I'm very tempted to then ask you, what was the secret sauce? How did you actually make it happen?
For that, probably it should be a different session for that. But okay, one liner, Ankur, to me is that, like I defined what is a challenge, I also defined a dream. So when we are selling our understanding to people, we also sold to our R&D portfolio. Sold means I'm talking the idea of R&D portfolio, making sure that it is benchmarked to the world's best benchmarks, and then gone to those lenders for making it. For that, we went to McKinsey to study our product. We went to GT to study our products, right? Valued them and showed it, or I will say, probably showcasing it in all the roadmaps that we have shown it to them, all the road shows that we have done, telling people what we are doing. So rather than selling a financial number, I told the financial world a number which is trustworthy, believable, and based on certain beliefs. So it is selling a dream rather than selling a financial number. I will put it in this way. But people did fund us, and I'm sincerely grateful to them. And the managing directors or the CEOs of those banks, some of them have retired nowadays, but I sincerely acknowledge their vision. I sincerely acknowledge with a lot of gratitude that they have done it based on their belief on what we have told them. And it has been proved success at a later date.
Yeah, I was just going to say the results are bearing out. So yes. I think the faith, is certainly getting validated. It's always fantastic to hear, stories of this nature. It gives a lot of hope to companies that, otherwise would, let's say, tread the conventional, toe the line in terms of, the kind of funding that's available to them, but really challenging the assumptions, and like you said, selling a dream, if they truly believe in it, I think that can really go a long way. And all you need is partners who believe in that dream, right? So that's the same story with equity, and in this case, that was the same story with debt as well. So
absolutely. And Ankur, just I will not compare, and pardon me for this next sentence I'll be talking. I'm not comparing, once again, quote and unquote. If you really look at the success of Apple, you look at the success of probably today, the Tesla. What is that? He also funded it, both of them funded heavily by debt, right? Initially. But the question was that they believed on the product that they are going to, deliver to the market. Whether it is ahead of time or not, I don't know. I don't want to comment. But not comparing, I can tell you, when in Indian pharma industry, nobody thought about a, human recombinant DNA insulin. My company did it 20 years back, first time after they innovated in this country. Even believe that we can do it. When nobody 25 years back thought that after 25 years, the world will see the complete AMRs, antimicrobial resistance, because our antibiotics do not work anymore on the almost more than 80% of the bacteria, particularly in the, some kind of pseudomonas, which is upper respiratory tract, or the lower, I will say, urinary tract infection, which are very, very critical. 25 years back, my chairman, Dr. Havel Khurakiwala, could think of it. And our journey started in 1997, and our first recognition came in 2015. So 18 years of struggle actually got into there when nobody thought about it. Today, when he used to speak 15 years back about AMRs, nobody talked about it in the world. Today, even a white newspaper, not those pink newspapers, they regularly publish a AMR. If you search Google, you will find it. What is AMR? What is AMR essay? And people talk about it. But he thought 15, 25 years back. So I think that really went well in terms of the people who also believed in us. And I'm sincerely grateful for that.
And I think, if I'm being honest, Manas, I've spoken to a lot of, we speak to CFOs and finance leaders all the time. I think what's unique about this particular story and in your case is that for a CFO and finance leader to really invest so much in understanding the business and actually believing in the outlook of the business almost as passionately as the founder or the CEO of any business. I think that is a lesson in itself, because a lot of finance leaders believe that finance is the domain that they're handling, and their job is sort of fiscal discipline and planning and all of that. But being actually able to comprehend business and understand the business at a depth where you can then eventually go and sell it to investors, to your lenders, I think that requires probably a different level of passion for the space and belief in the in the company. Very commendable. I just wanted to sort of call that out.
Ankur, thank you very much. Ankur, I would like to talk about this because you talked about it. I have had this kind of conversations earlier on many of my interviews, and people did mention, but with all due, with all the humbleness, I must say that I have not done anything in this. Let me put it in this way. As a professional, when we look at into a business, what do? We talk about making a professional periphery or paraphernalia on which we need to play. It's like the referee who plays soccer. I'm an adjoint fan of the soccer, you have already talked. His one whistle stops the game or controls the game or enhances the game, right? Now, probably majority of the time, finance plays that. As an entrepreneur, you are an entrepreneur. You know that. You will be probably, I will say, infinitely and endlessly optimistic. No entrepreneur can be pessimistic in life. Professionals are trained to be pessimistic. That's the problem of knowledge. And if you know that even in late 19th century, the famous German philosopher, the Kant, he talked about problem of knowledge, right? So I'm not correlating it, but I'm just saying, as a professional, we are trained to follow certain guidelines. As an entrepreneur, there are no schools. Nobody went to a school and become a Dhirubhai Ambani or Ratan Tata or anything, right? They became, that's because they are an entrepreneurs. So as a finance professional, I think we have been trained over the period to be like the way I talked about, a critic of choices, making sure that the strategic platform is adequately compensated with all the paraphernalia of restrictions and constraints that we put in, right? We did that. If you ask me that question, I will answer that. That is very, very important. Had I not done it, probably I would have not sold the dream. If you don't have your bicep, you will not be able to even work. So those paraphernalias are those biceps and triceps. But to be very, very candid on this is that, very importantly, a CFO must also understand the value side of the game. And I have coined a word, this is my quotation, and this is a registered trademark of mine, that the CFOs are not your strategic partners. They are, in my word, is an economic guardian. So I spoke about in various forums, we can speak at a later date, but an economic guardian cannot hold hands or cannot link, cannot only support, but also guide. So it's very, very important, but we will talk about that while selling the dream, how the paraphernalia of the structure of making sure that the compliance is happening. If you remember, my second point was evolving complexity of the business and taxation and the compliance is how we manage. That was the second challenge that we did. That is very, very important. We did that also. And based on that, people thought like we moved out of a traditional accounting firm of auditing to a big four auditing. We moved out of homegrown internal audit and risk management practices to a big four risk management and risk assurance practices globally after my joining, right? So we did that. People also felt that there is an assurance backup, right? There is a benchmarking backup, and there is a paraphernalia, I use that word quite frequently, of our MIS structured programs. So unless otherwise you all have that, your dream is a bodiless daydreaming probably. It's not bad, but it's not good yet. Sorry, Ankur, I took a little more time on that.
No. I think the analogy of economic guardian versus a strategic partner is an interesting one. I think the CFO being a strategic partner is often loosely used, in the business world. So, I'm sure you have a lot more thoughts on that. But if you had to just take a couple of minutes on elaborating a little more on when you say economic guardian versus a strategic partner, what is it that you have in mind, and why is it that a finance leader cannot be a strategic partner in the truest sense of the word?
You see, probably, Ankur, it's a little detailed discussion. I will take 2-3 minutes on this and try to whatever best I can compress upon on this. If you really look at when you go to a doctor, what do? You say truth, because your expectation is that he will treat you, he or she will treat you well. So you never hide something. But unfortunately, the training of a doctor is to hide. Because doctor is supposed to, they have taken an oath that they will never ever share the medical history of his or her patient. Now, which one is the correct one? There is a dichotomy, correct? You are saying the truth, but he will never say it to anybody else. But both, the intention is to make sure that they merge together and making sure a right decision-making platform. CFOs, unfortunately, were trained to either do a compliance or do a reporting or become a business partner. I hate this word. Why I need to be a business partner? I do not understand. Because there is nothing called a business partner, right? I will talk about it. Or a strategic partner. So this is probably in 70s and 80s that you are a bookkeeper, data manager, compliance, and compliance complexity grew over the period of time. So that technically the demand for CFOs forever, and not only in India, probably more in the outside India, because of their compliance orientation, was to make sure that you create an environment of compliance and making sure things are there, maybe hidden. I'm not meaning it the hidden in any wrong manner, but hidden in the manner the doctor hides. That's what I put that analogy, right? So, but when gradually the different changes happened in India, particularly, and also in the world, like IFRS came in, the accounting standards kept changing, the tax rules kept on changing, the listing agreements globally started changing because of as a CFO, one has a very unique opportunity to play as a chief ambassador. That means the person is actually, communicating with or representing the company with the regulators, with the stakeholders, with the board of directors, with the investors, with everybody, lenders, rating agency, analysts, everyone. So he or she is the very key connect or ambassador or representative of the country, of her company. Point number 2 is a chief information architect. And why I say it's a chief information architect is that it's not an information gatherer or catcher. It's an architect who beautifies the information, right? And number 3, you are probably the chief business valuer, because you know what your business guys are talking about, and you know what the expectations of the investors or lenders or the supplier of capital. So you have to map between the two. So if that needs to be done, one has to come out of those accounting, taxation, the treasury and the mundane actions of FP&A, AR, AP, and so on and so forth, to a typical value zone, which I call it as value territory, whereby you are selling the dream. And while doing that, I call it as an economic guardian. It's like our mother. She held our hand when we started working, but she held our hand till the time we needed it. After that, she left it. Otherwise, we would have been taking her as Baishaki rather than something else, right? So a guardianship is a bigger role than probably a partner. Partner is a very limited, obsolete word that I believe, where there is a vested interest. But as a guardian, there is no vested interest. You know where the values are. And that values can be ethical practices, values can be governance, values can be bringing in the right kind of framework, bringing in right kind of an investor, lender, atmosphere, your supporter, your consultants, your auditors, everybody together in an overall hemisphere whereby you have a similar kind of a climate where you can work together. That is what I call it as an economic guardian. And probably I expect the CFOs now onwards to play more on that rather than what was trained and expected to be in the past.
Very fascinating. I think that's a great way to summarize, the role of a CFO in today's times. For finance professionals, as they grow through the ladder, are they getting the right kind of exposure to be able to play this role in the long run? And what is it that young professionals can do, in order to groom themselves for playing this role out in the future?
Well, there is a both question, answer to this question, both is yes as well as no, but more towards the yes, but 30 to 40% still no. The reasons is that tradition, whether it is an entrepreneur-driven organizations like you, who are very young, new generation, new thought process, or a very old generation organization that I belong to, or some of the other corporates are, which are 50, 100 years old, both places, there is an expectation from CFO. So call CFO means you need an information or you have to tackle a problem. That problem can be tax, problem can be funding. That is somewhere something there is a problem. Now that is an expectation of the management from the CEO to the CFO. Probably that needs a change, and that change cannot happen unidirectionally. Both have to play that well. So my understanding is that still CFOs and finance functions in 90% of the organization is treated as a service function. But I can tell you, Ankur, the day the organization feels that the finance is not a service function or a support function, there will be a complete change of the organization. Like HR, if somebody feels it is a function of a service or a support, I pity to that organization, right? So it's not. It's one of the most critical function. If I'm the CEO, I will every time call my chief HR officer and the CFO for every my decision making. I will never ever ignore them for anything that I do, right? But so this is one side. On the other side, there is a little bit of dichotomy from the CFOs also, because of being their KMPs and they are restricted and restrained by quite amount of laws, right? Whereby they have personal obligations like independent directors and so on and so forth. It makes things like a referee of a very Brazil and Argentina match, or Argentina and Germany match. He will be first and foremost will come with a negativity that किसी भी condition पे रोको, it should not go out of the hand. It is unfortunate, but the best of the referees, if you have seen, they played the best matches. They ensure the matches are most competitive without getting dirty. That is a unique thing of a referee. I always watch that 45-year-old man, and for 90 minutes, traveling from this goalpost to the another goalpost, whereas the majority of the players are not running for 90 minutes. But this fellow is running at the age of 45 plus. Others are in 20s. Unique opportunity. So as a CEO or as a CFO at 45, I will say that one has to run quite a bit. never blow a whistle unnecessarily, and never also stop a whistle blowing when things are very bad or needs to be stopped. So it's a very clear. But unfortunately, it comes with a little bit of negativity at the beginning, because that's the demand of the law, or the structure in which we work. Yeah. It is unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
No, very well put. I really like the analogy of the referee. I think it's very well put. Manas, just shifting gears before we wrap up. I wanted to reflect on the last 6 to 9 months. Every organization, every industry has gone through a tumultuous phase. Curious to know what's been your experience while at Wockhardt during the pandemic, and what were some of the biggest challenges, especially on the supply chain front, given the kind of disruption that we saw in the economy. What were some of the challenges that your organization faced and your supply chains faced? And any insights, any learnings from that?
We, like any other industry, we did face a lot of trouble. But a good part is that we, being into an essential commodity, right, essential services, we came faster. Yeah. Our plants were also allowed to operate faster by first week of April, whereas the majority of the plants were stopped, right? So the supply chain, particularly, I will say for initial 1 month, there was a real trouble. And the supplies from China and all for the APIs still remained a trouble. But like I told you, that the challenge is probably the biggest motherhood of innovation. So I think majority of us played quite well, right? In terms of getting alternate resources, getting into alternate sources of materials faster. Though it is that it's a highly regulated industry. You can't even change your the packaging, right? Can't change the tertiary packaging. Right, there are also a lot of rules and regulations. So I felt that probably the first 1 month of the lockdown, so in the month of April, it was tough. Thereafter, it came back. What I have seen is that probably there is a delay in supply, but there is no stoppage in supply, right? Financing was not a problem during this phase, at least for us, and probably the suppliers, both small and medium segment industries that are very key associate of our success stories with Wockhardt globally. We felt that they also supported us well. Sometimes payments were delayed, but they also supported because their payments were also delayed. The cycle of probably 30 days credit went to 90 days credit, or 90 days credit went to 120 days credit, but it is on the every phase. One part I think I picked it up during this period is very important, is that probably all of us must, is that this pandemic has given us a unique opportunity to look at a zero working capital level, right? And that is what I think we should all take that benefit. It's not just in time working capital I'm talking about. I'm saying that if I have an inventory at the right place at the right time, probably I can sell off the inventory at the right moment, right? So going back from the demand phase to the demand planning and the production planning probably can be really re-looked into much more digitally and much more innovatively into the system. And also for the supply chain finance, particularly on the creditors funding, I think there are a lot of innovation that I could see, and it's very encouraging. And believe me, I love during this period because nobody came up and say, "Ye kya ho raha hai?" Because nobody could blame each other, which is the mud throwing generally used to happen, because it was given by something which all of us had no control. So that was a very good part, right? It's like rain, it's rain happening. You can't help it, right? So I think that way, since there were no enemy opposite to us, we started looking after each one of us as more as a friendly gesture, and that is there. But I will say that we did not face much trouble in terms of the supply chain, barring the initial few weeks.
Yeah, interesting. Do you see the supply chains getting back to normal anytime in the near future?
My feel it is completely normal now, and my feel is that it will remain normal. Pandemic will not stop, right? If you really look at the various epidemics that we have seen, not in this kind of a level, but it created havoc. Even a volcanic eruption in the northern hemisphere created havoc some time back, about 3-4 years back. You know that the complete flight zones were altered and so on and so forth. But uh, I'm very optimistic that this pandemic had given us a lot of opportunity, right? And not only in the pharma and healthcare, but in major industry. I'm feeling a little bad about my previous industry where I used to work on the travel and tourism and luxury hospitality. I think they really got the burnt of this thing, but hopefully that will come back. I'm told that the hotels are still booked more than 40% during this season. I'm very happy to hear that. It also shows economic curve, nothing to do with personality.
Yeah. Just one question on the supply chain front. Do you believe that the supply chain structures will fundamentally change, especially sourcing from China, for instance? There has been a lot of talk and a lot of over the last couple of years anyway. There has been initiatives towards sourcing domestically. Do you see that trend accelerating now, and especially in pharma?
Well, I will go back on this a little bit of point. About 20 years back, India used to deliver more than for 50% of world's API. Like today, 85% of the vaccinations in the world is supplied by us, right? More than 30% of the product is supplied by us, right? Globally. I'm talking of pharma. So if somebody goes back to the supply chain theory and saying, I will be Atmanirbhar, please do not take me wrong with the BJP propaganda or the government of India, self-reliance, that I will manufacture everything on my own and not to depend on China or anybody else, I think that will be too childish. Because most important part in a business is to add value, right? The person who brings a water from a tube well has no value. But when it is bottled in Avian and then it is priced at $5, the value is different, right? So I think we should be in India particularly, and when we know that our majority of this country can have a huge amount of benefit on export and can be a very big supplier to the world, we should look at only the value adds. So rather than selling a tire, we can sell a car. It is a much more value add. Rather than selling an API, I can sell a formulation. It is much more value add for the company, for the country, and even, I will say, global platform. You have a reliable source in that particular case, and play with that with the human evolution. So I will not go by the concept that everything needs to be done by us. Had it been done, then Swiggy's and Zomato's would have not been there in the world during this pandemic, because we never run our kitchen, right? Because the cooks were not there. So we were dependent on somebody else. That is the value add we need. And I will sincerely believe or try to believe that particularly in pharma, we must focus on value-added products in India rather than manufacturing API.
No, got it. I think that's that's very insightful, Manas. Thank you so much. Look, I think that's pretty much all that I had for this episode of CashFlo Unscripted. I think we traversed a variety of topics over the course of the last hour or so. Thank you so much, Manas. I think this was truly a very, very insightful conversation. This has been great, and we hope to have you back on the show soon again. But for now, that's all from all of us here on this episode of CashFlo Unscripted. Thanks everyone for listening in. If you enjoyed this episode, do consider subscribing to us on Spotify or Apple, so we can gently remind you when our next episode is out. If you also want us to add us to your mailing list, or you're interested in joining us on the show, do let us know. Stay safe, have a good day, and talk to you soon. Thank you so much, Manas. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's indeed nice meeting you on this podcast. Thank you so much. Hope to see you soon. Stay safe.